who's the producer of the Cryptopia film.
Thanks, Peter. 7 years ago, I made a film about the history of money, banking, and Bitcoin. Buckle up, we said, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. And now, some of the big brains and big egos who championed cryptocurrency claim they are building a crypto utopia.
Magical things will happen.
With something called blockchain technology. And it just might change your life.
And they really could compete with, if not even take down, the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons.
My name is Thorsten Hoffmann, and I'm going to put some of these claims to the test. Forget all the hype. We'll explore the true potential of this new invention. See who is already using it.
Making it really easy and simple for people to own a piece of a solar farm or a wind farm.
And go deep into a secret bunker that holds billions in Bitcoin. But there are those who want to kill it.
Join with me in introducing a bill to outlaw cryptocurrency so that we nip this in the bud.
Or change the world with it. Welcome to Ground Zero in the battle for the future of the internet. Web 3.0.
They wanted a science fiction dream. What they actually did was build forthcoming disaster.
A lot of people were not willing to learn and were not willing to admit they were wrong.
Why is this fraud allowed to speak at this conference?
Stop telling me that I have no clues.
That's just bullshit.
If you don't support free speech, you don't support Bitcoin. You're an enemy of Bitcoin.
This is bigger than the internet, the Iron Age, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution. This affects the entire world.
Okay, let's start slowly, with the basics of money and its creation.
The total value of all the world's money is about $120 trillion. What you probably didn't know is that each new dollar is created by governments and banks as debt, which needs to be paid back by someone in the future, with interest. That's why there isn't enough money in the world to repay all that debt. And there never will be. Oh, and almost all of the world's money is already digital, just entries in a ledger, usually managed by a bank. Only a small portion exists as physical currency, like cash or coins. Think of it this way. Your employer deposits $1,000 into your bank account. Then, you pay $200 in taxes, $500 for rent, $200 for bills and shopping, and so forth. Whether you use credit cards, debit cards, PayPal, or bank transfers, they're all just pluses and minuses in different digital ledgers. That's why there's almost no need for physical money in our daily lives.
During the financial crisis in 2008, a mysterious figure called Satoshi Nakamoto published this 9-page white paper. It said, with Bitcoin's open source software, we can create our own money without banks or governments. This new nerd money, called cryptocurrency, is created and stored in computers. And before long, there was a growing fan club, mostly guys like Roger Ver. Today, he's a polarizing figure, but back then, he gave away thousands of coins to kickstart the movement, and they all called him Bitcoin Jesus.
I think that for many years, he brought more people to Bitcoin than anyone else, and we will forever be grateful to him for doing that.
When I was a kid, I was reading all these science fiction books. They were talking about how the world is going to be when we have this like anonymous digital cash that people can use on the internet that's not controllable by anybody. And then when Bitcoin came along, it was like, wow, the science fiction money that I had been reading about as a kid is finally here. So I got so excited about it. I heard about it at about 10 in the morning, and I was planning to go to work that day, but I didn't. I stayed home the entire day reading about it. Didn't leave the house, stayed up all night that night reading about it. Stayed up all night the next night reading about it.
He went deep down that rabbit hole, to the point of physical exhaustion.
The hospital, so I called up a friend of mine and said, please help me, I'm so sick, can you bring me to the hospital?
Yeah, Roger got bit bad by the Bitcoin bug, like so many others who followed.
It's truly one of the most exciting inventions ever in the entire history of humankind.
But how does it work? When my friends ask me to explain, well, I often start with this analogy.
Imagine a bank vault where you have a safety deposit box. Your key opens one of the boxes, where you can securely store physical valuables like gold coins. In Bitcoin, there are digital keys. Think of them as very long passwords. Your private key gives you access to a wallet, which unlocks billions of unique Bitcoin addresses. Each one is a virtual safety deposit box that only you can open with your key. And there are more addresses in this virtual vault than atoms in the universe. The doors to these boxes are transparent. You can see inside them. Here's one with digital money, 0.21 Bitcoins. Sending them from one box to another is what's called a Bitcoin transaction. We'll explain that later, but for now, just remember that these digital coins can only exist inside these transparent address boxes, can't be copied, and can't ever leave the vault. And this vault is owned by no single entity. You don't need permission from a government, a bank, or a corporation to use it.
For most early adopters of Bitcoin, it was all about global peer-to-peer electronic cash. Room 77 in Berlin was one of the very first businesses to accept Bitcoins as payment for physical things, beers and burgers.
Back in 2011, there were no mobile wallets, right? So you had to go there, bring your laptop, type this long address, risk losing the money if you didn't type it correctly. So the first guy who built a mobile wallet was some guy in Berlin who built it in order to buy his beer with his phone instead of his computer.
Wir akzeptieren keine Kreditkarten.
Okay, was ist dein Problem mit Kreditkarten?
Mein Problem mit Kreditkarten ist, dass es mich als Merchant 3% Gebühren kostet, dass ich 180 Tage bangen muss, dass man mir mein Geld nicht wieder zurückholt.
Credit cards are an old technology and actually pretty complex. And your payment details are shared with many middlemen. Each of these parties are also taking a cut of the action, which is built into the price of nearly everything you buy. If you purchase something internationally, double the number of middlemen and triple the fees. Credit cards handle almost $20 trillion of transactions per year.
Early Bitcoin adopters like Room 77 avoided paying credit card fees. But Jörg's real beef was with the bankers who collect them.
Was hast du für ein Problem mit Banken?
Das Problem, was ich mit Banken habe, ist, dass wir es in unserer Gesellschaft geschafft haben, mit den Banken eine unverhaftbare Kaste, eine nicht ins Gefängnis steckbare Verbrechersyndikate aufzubauen, die too big to fail, too big to jail. HSBC ist ein großartiges Beispiel mit 10.000-facher Beihilfe zum Mord. Da musste nicht mal jemand vor Gericht gehen, weil der oberste Staatsanwalt der USA klargestellt hat, können wir nicht machen, bricht die Wirtschaft zusammen.
My problem with banks is different. Why can't they send money overnight or on a weekend? After all, it's updating digital ledgers, right? Just moving data. We can send pictures or videos to anyone on the planet almost instantly and for free. We live in the age of the internet, but the banks seem to be stuck in the past century. So what if those slow and expensive middlemen with their multiple ledgers could be replaced by a giant database, synchronized over the internet? That's the big idea behind Bitcoin. And it's run by a decentralized global network of powerful mining computers and regular laptops. Here's how it works. I use my key to open my wallet and then instruct the network to send Bitcoins to the address. Most Bitcoin apps use QR codes to identify an address. You scan it, then swipe to use your key and approve the transaction.
This information is shared throughout the global network within seconds. Every 10 minutes or so, one miner, using a tremendous amount of energy, beats all the others in a contest to solve a very difficult math problem. That miner is authorized to arrange the most recent transactions into a structured block and is rewarded in Bitcoins for this work. All of the data contained inside each block is represented by a checksum. The miner now adds the new block to the previous one. That's why it's called the blockchain. Now the ledger will be updated globally. The checksums of the previous block match the beginning of the new one, which are baked together forever. It's impossible to tinker with the data inside the block without changing the checksums and breaking the chain.
This immutability is the first rule of Bitcoin. It means no one can ever change what was once recorded in the blockchain or spend the same coin twice. That's also called censorship resistance. and it's critical to Bitcoin being used as real money. Award-winning journalist Laura Shin tells me a story about women bloggers in Afghanistan being paid in Bitcoin.
One of the women had an abusive husband and saved up her Bitcoins and eventually was able to divorce him because she was able to control her money when she earned the Bitcoins.
In my first film, the early adopters said that this kind of financial freedom for everyone was just around the corner.
World's most populous network is adopting Bitcoin. That's the internet. The world's largest economy is adopting Bitcoin. That's the internet. We have transcended borders.
It's totally failed as electronic cash.
David Gerard doesn't buy all the hype. He's one of the most outspoken critics and skeptics of blockchain technology.
It's not very good as a payment system. There's a small payment use case if you want to trade in things that the government doesn't want you to trade in.
That's David's polite way of saying illegal stuff.
In 2011, most of my partner colleagues were saying three things. So it was either drugs, pornography, arms sales.
The Silk Road was a black market on the dark web, where buyers and sellers used bitcoins to fly under the radar of the authorities. It had 1 million users until the FBI showed up and shut it down. They caught this guy for running it and confiscated the coins held in escrow by snatching his computer. And then they locked him away for life. No doubt, cryptocurrencies can be a tool for criminal activity, but so are dollar bills or the banking system. And let's not forget, the blockchain is a public ledger.
It's actually been quite useful for uncovering crimes. A former federal prosecutor named Catherine Hahn, she was the one who discovered that there were a couple of federal agents that were pilfering the bitcoins that the government had obtained from the Silk Road case for their own gain. And what was interesting was she got a tip that there might be one agent that was doing this, but from looking at the movements on the blockchain itself, she realized that there were two people.
The prosecutor could see those bitcoins being moved, and when the dirty cops tried to sell them for dollars, they got busted. While they thought the technology provides anonymity, it actually enabled uncovering their crime. But what makes bitcoins worth stealing? Why do they have value at all?
Let's go back to where bitcoins are stored, in transparent digital deposit boxes, protected by strong cryptography. They can never be copied or leave the vault because any transaction of any bitcoin, down to a 100 millionth fraction, is recorded in the blockchain for eternity. This synchronized global ledger is shared among thousands of computers worldwide. That's why it can't be compromised or altered. Think about that. We can make an infinite number of perfect digital copies of a movie, a song, any file. But for the first time in history, this distributed record keeping allows us to have a truly unique and fungible digital object that is also scarce. If you could count all of these virtual coins, you'd find about 18 million of them today. The mining reward is the only way new coins are created. In the first years of Bitcoin, miners competed for 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. Then, their reward for processing transactions dropped to 25 Bitcoins. Then 12.5, and then half again and again every 4 years. It's good old-fashioned supply and demand. If investors or users of Bitcoin create a higher demand than this decreasing supply, the price will go up. When the cap of 21 million is reached, the protocol stops the network from creating any more. It's the opposite of our traditional money supply, which keeps growing and growing.
An unlimited amount of dollars versus a very limited supply of bitcoins. You do the math. If you use euros or dollars, you might not care about a little inflation per year. But if your currency isn't stable, you might be a trillionaire in paper and be dead broke.
I grew up in Patagonia, in the southern part of Argentina. My parents are sheep ranchers there. And I remember growing up in my childhood, I saw my parents lose everything 3 times. First because of a huge devaluation, then because of hyperinflation, and the last time because the government confiscated all bank deposits. I think that today there are billions of people, at least 4 billion people, who would be a lot better off by having access to a form of money that is non-political and more democratic.
We think of finance, we think of banking, we think of money in terms of the experience and perspective of a Western European or developed nation person. And that is really just 1.5 billion people who have a very privileged financial life. What about the other 6 billion? Every single country that is free has essentially a legal status for cryptocurrencies that is very open and permissive, and every single country that is unfree has restrictive or banned cryptocurrency status.
This is the Berlin Wall, still a powerful symbol of a government trying to control its citizens. But this is what happens when people want to be free. The very first open crypto war is playing out in Venezuela, where the local currency loses value every hour due to hyperinflation.
A lot of people in Venezuela are trying to mine cryptocurrencies, and the government views this as a threat, obviously, because they're trying to keep the bolivar propped up. The government actually provides electricity to a lot of people, and if they perceive that your electricity usage has gone up, they will come and check if you have mining equipment in your house, and they will confiscate it if they find it.
And that brings us to the big question. Can governments or banks ban Bitcoin? Well, some politicians still think they can stop open source software.
I look for colleagues to join with me in introducing a bill to outlaw cryptocurrency purchases by Americans so that we nip this in the bud, in part because an awful lot of our international power comes from the fact that the dollar is the standard unit of international finance and transactions. Clearing through the New York Fed is critical for major oil and other transactions. And it is the announced purpose of the supporters of cryptocurrency to take that power away from us.
Cryptocurrency represents a litmus test for governments. It reveals how much your government believes in the fundamental freedoms and human rights. Because if they don't trust their own citizens to have control over their own money, that says a lot about the government, says very little about cryptocurrency.
You see, the reason why some governments and most banks are threatened by this technology is simple. Your private key and your wallet can replace your bank account. The network is run by software, and its currency is made and maintained by computing power and electricity. It can't be manipulated by central bankers, Wall Street lobbyists, or politicians. But with new freedom comes new responsibility.
Simple rule. If you control the keys, it's your Bitcoin. If you don't control the keys, it's not your Bitcoin. Your keys, your Bitcoin. Not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Your keys, your Bitcoin. Not your keys, not your Bitcoin.
Got that? If you lose your key, you will never be able to access your coins again. And if someone hacks your computer where you store those passwords, your coins will be stolen in a second. And remember how Wences' family had their money stolen by their own government? Well, maybe that's why he built the Fort Knox of Bitcoin security, Zappo.
Most of our 7 million customers are in emerging markets. In countries where there's problems with the currency, we have explosions in activity like Venezuela right now or Turkey. And we developed this system of vaults where we have 5 private keys for each one of our Bitcoin addresses. We keep those private keys in an offline server that has never been online, will never be online. It's inside the vault. The vault is inside a bunker, usually deep underground. Our main one is in Switzerland in a decommissioned military bunker.
I just had to see it for myself, even though it took months for us to get cleared for a tour. We were met by Christoph Oschwald, a former military commander who runs the place, and a representative from Zappo. Christoph said the guards would rather shoot us than show us around. I hope he was kidding.
They need to bring in the material to the other side of the personal lock.
First up, one more check of our IDs, a pat down for weapons or any other monkey business, and gear inspection. Even the boss was searched. It took nearly an hour to get my team through security, but it was worth it. No other film crew has been allowed access.
We are the largest custodian of Bitcoin in the world because a lot of the largest holders in the world use us for security.
Rumor has it that 10% of all Bitcoins are stored here and in their 4 other secret locations.
Unfortunately, I can't confirm any of those numbers.
From the mountain, we are getting a lot of benefits, right? Earthquake-proof, flooding-proof, but on the other side, you're facing a lot of additional cost.
Like maintaining 7 independent backup power supplies. The labyrinth of tunnels deep into the mountain is interrupted by nuclear-grade doors. It's a level of security applied to all of the data Christoph protects here, not just for Zappo.
And we cannot talk too much about it because it's pretty secret what is down there, right?
Are we allowed to film there?
No.
There were doors that remained shut and security measures we weren't allowed to see.
And some of those checks may be biometric, including the eye and a fingerprint scan. And the fingerprint scanner also makes sure that you are alive, so that you didn't cut someone's finger and you're just using it to open a gate.
Yeah, so you must have a pulse.
Don't touch the racks.
These aren't Zappo's actual servers, but if you've ever wondered what cryptocurrency thieves dream about, it's sitting somewhere down here, unplugged from the internet.
But there is absolutely no way, zero way, to attack the data which is on the cold storage side.
But here's my question. Why do I need the cold offline servers to be inside a mountain? Can it be in my basement?
While this server is in your basement, it still can be stolen, right? So this is like money. It is data. Yes, it's bit and byte, but it is money at the end, and a lot of money. And this is why this data center here is more a bank than a data center.
Let's do a quick recap. We now have billions of dollars worth of data secured in digital banks deep inside secret military bunkers. If you don't think Bitcoin is already changing the world's concept of money, you haven't been paying attention. Remember Mervin? He used to be a senior executive at Deutsche Bank. His colleagues once said Bitcoin was for lawbreakers and troublemakers. He now runs a crypto fund out of Malta.
Our research shows that the crypto markets are going to probably be worth about 8.7 trillion in 2027.
Which is a 50x from today.
Exactly.
Most financial analysts say you better stick to your shares and bonds and dollars. Bitcoin is dangerous nonsense, far too risky as investment. To others, Bitcoin is an escape hatch that will take them away from risk, an insurance against a financial doomsday, a way out of the debt crisis, negative interest rates, trade wars, and economic downturn. They say it's an anti-fragile asset, uncorrelated to financial markets. So how about the general public? In America, the younger generation already starts to trust this new asset class. And Wences says Bitcoin may reach $1 million per coin.
I would say the biggest financial mistake you can make right now is to own an amount of Bitcoin that you cannot afford to lose, because it's super risky and you may lose it. The second biggest financial mistake you can make is not to own any, because you put 1% of your net worth in Bitcoin. Most people can afford to lose 1% of their net worth. And if I am right, it's gonna be more than 100% of your net worth. So with a non-material exposure, you change your life. Now, what you would spend on a romantic weekend with your wife, say, sorry, we're not gonna do that this weekend. I'm gonna just buy Bitcoin, consider it spent, it disappear, check in 7 years. I either gave you bad advice and cost you a weekend, or I want a grandkid called Juancito.
But what you fail to mention is the currency, the microtransaction.
All of that is irrelevant, right? Meaning, all of the cryptocurrencies are way too volatile for anyone to take them seriously.
Hold on. Let's go back to where we started. Bitcoin was created as peer-to-peer electronic cash. That was the killer app, a payment directly from you to me, from me to the coffee shop.
I have bought a bag of coffee for 2 Bitcoin in 2012, which today cost me $12,000 in today's money. That is a deflationary effect. As long as Bitcoin keeps doing sudden increases in prices, that's going to stop retail use in its tracks.
With Bitcoin, you can send $1 or $1 million worth of value anywhere in the world. You can do it for free.
Yeah, that's what they all used to tell me. Cheap, easy, fast, global, unstoppable. Let me explain what caused this big debate. Every block contains only about 1 megabyte of data. That means only a very limited number of transactions can fit into each block. If you want your payment to jump the line, you can choose to pay a premium fee or sit and wait. At one point, the blocks became so full that the transaction time went to several hundred hours. That's days. And it was more expensive than international wire services. It got so bad that a Bitcoin conference wouldn't take payment in Bitcoins. And he's the guy who promised me moving money fast and for free. What went wrong?
One philosophy could be described as Bitcoin as digital gold, and the other philosophy could be described as Bitcoin as digital cash.
We've already met the digital gold camp who opposes any changes to the protocol, despite the high fees. Roger represents the other side of the debate. They wanted a system upgrade. The solution is easy. Just increase the size of the blocks from 1 to 2, 4, 8 megabytes so that more transactions fit into them. This will lower the fees and people will start using Bitcoin as cash again. But most of the community disagreed. So Bitcoin Jesus had become Bitcoin Judas. And there was a split into 2 separate Bitcoins.
Every revolution is followed by the counter-revolution, which is usually a purge of the original revolutionaries.
When I first started covering the space, everyone was united in their struggle against the establishment. Now the industry has grown so much that there are competing parties, propaganda machines, conspiracy theories. It looks a lot like politics.
The biggest fight within the Bitcoin ecosystem is over at the moment is who has the right to the name Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, I think the version of Bitcoin described in the Bitcoin white paper has the strongest claim to the name Bitcoin than anything else, and that's Bitcoin Cash.
I think it's fraudulent to say that and causing people to buy Bitcoin Cash when they actually wanted to buy Bitcoin.
Ja, also das ganze Bcash-Ding ist für mich schlicht und einfach ein Betrug. Wir haben hier Kunden, die versehentlich, weil sie dachten, sie kaufen Bitcoin, Bcash gekauft haben. Die brechen hier zusammen, hysterisch, wenn ich ihnen erkläre, dass sie gefälschte Bitcoins gekauft haben.
I know. You want to find out what any of this has to do with this new Cryptopia, a revolutionary internet. We'll get there, I promise. But first, we need to go from Bitcoin's original blockchain to hundreds of blockchains. Back in 2011, when Charlie Lee was a Google engineer, he wanted a faster and lighter version of Satoshi's cryptocurrency, and was one of the first to experiment with the open source software.
The actual coding, in terms of the code differences between Bitcoin and Litecoin, was actually pretty trivial.
And what does that mean in time?
I would say 4 or 5 hours.
Litecoin was one of the first alternative cryptocurrencies, or altcoins. Some of the early adopters, like Charlie, made fortunes. Soon, there were hundreds of coins made by cryptographers, copycats, and conmen. There's a coin for bloggers, a currency for online gamers, one with anonymity, and even one for banks. But can this invention unleash something even more powerful than digital currencies? Back in 2014, I met the kid who knew how to do it.
Hi, I'm Vitalik Buterin, co-founder of Bitcoin Magazine, founder of Ethereum, and just general Bitcoin and cryptocurrency advocate.
Just 19 years old, Vitalik was on a mission to make money programmable. He built a separate blockchain called Ethereum, with its own currency called Ether.
The comparison might be Bitcoin is like a spreadsheet and Ethereum is like a spreadsheet with macros.
Using our analogy, Ethereum allows you to store cryptocurrency and computer code in the same secure box. Here's how a smart contract might work. Let's say I bet Charlie that a Litecoin will be worth $200 on January 1st of next year. We each put an Ether into a box along with a smart contract. A simple program that automatically checks the price of Litecoins on that future date. If I'm right, the money goes to me. If I'm wrong, it's sent to Charlie.
A smart contract is neither smart nor a contract. It's a dumb program. And once you understand that all it is a dumb program, that clarifies a lot of stuff. And the word contract there is in the meaning of finance.
Most financial arrangements are pretty simple and clear-cut. A bet with Charlie, your home loan, an insurance policy. Just two parties and some form of exchange of value based on a set of rules called a contract. The same is true for global financial markets. Think bonds, futures, derivatives, credit default swaps. They're all just contracts, and the world economy runs on them, using middlemen, who all charge high fees. Proponents say that if we used smart contracts, we could tell the bankers, lawyers, escrow agents, and Wall Street finance guys to take a hike.
So what we're doing is we're saying we have this Ethereum network. Inside the Ethereum network, there's this asset called Ether, and we're actually going to be selling Ether. We're going to be selling Ether at a rate of 1,000 to 2,000 Ether for 1 Bitcoin, and that's how we're going to raise all the money.
It worked. Vitalik figured out a way to fund the Ethereum project, and it made his investors very rich. This new model for fundraising soon had a name, an initial coin offering, or ICO.
IPOs and ICOs sound similar, but they're nothing similar. The only thing similar about them is they both help you raise money. IPOs you don't do until you have a company, until you have revenue, until you have users, until you actually prove to the public investors that this is a valuable company that's worth investing and it's worth buying their stock. ICOs, it's pre-product, you have maybe a couple people on the team, it's just a white paper. And so people are just buying into faith that this is something that will exist.
The goal here is ultimately, I like to see 8-year-olds building their own financial systems.
Yeah, but what if some of these 8-year-olds are also scammers?
So let's say I'm trying to do an ICO, and I create a smart contract where I create 1 million coins. And one of the transactions is that if you send me $100, I will send you that many worth of coins.
It was a mad gold rush.
People realized, wow, if I can just pull together a project in a white paper, I can raise money.
Like a lot of money. One project raised $150 million in 3 hours. And another one collected $35 million in under 30 seconds. Some people hawking new coins didn't actually exist. This handsome chap is the graphic designer of a Bulgarian ICO. Actually, they just posted a photo of Ryan Gosling. Another project raised millions in Ether and then vanished, leaving investors with this website. Look closer, that's nice.
I would say about 2 to 5% of the thousands of ICOs that are happening are actually legit.
And the rest is?
Pretty scammy or just not gonna work.
Can you define for me what a shitcoin is?
I think it's just a derogatory term people use on coins that they don't like. For Bitcoin maximalists, people who only care about Bitcoin, everything else is a shitcoin.
Sure, there are tons of useless projects that will never work. But maybe I was a bit too harsh on ICOs. Democratizing startup finance can be a good thing. There were also many legit companies raising capital. Over the years, I've met many founders who have real offices with real people trying to solve real problems. But to Bitcoin maximalists, other blockchains, ICOs, IEOs, STOs, smart contracts on Ethereum, that's all just a waste of time.
There is no such thing as blockchain. Revolutionize the healthcare industry and the automotive production.
Of course there is. Huh? Of course there is. What you're saying is a maximalist point of view. You are speaking about from a perspective of a cult or a sect. My problem is that you are hijacking a movement of a technology that is far greater and has far more potential than just these individuals.
There's all of these different things that you could use blockchain for, right? And so people they're almost like different ecosystems. And then what you see is almost like an evolutionary process, right? Where the blockchains fork and they have the same ancestries, but they adapt to different environments. And we see this like ever increasing level of diversity in number of blockchains. So I think the idea that there's like one blockchain, going to be one blockchain, and it's going to be fit for everything, it's almost like disregarding the nature of evolution.
Meanwhile, the big corporations have been studying cryptocurrency, and they think that Bitcoin's underlying database is where the magic is. The motto in the boardrooms: blockchain, not Bitcoin. Back in Germany, my friend Oliver keeps tabs on the men in suits. He used to be one of them.
Also es sind fast alle großen Unternehmen, die dort Aktivitäten haben. Ich kenne beispielsweise bei den großen Autoherstellern, bei BMW gibt es eine.
BMW is looking at using the blockchain for their future fleet of electric cars to interact with public transport. Lufthansa wants to see if the blockchain can better track parts and maintenance. And Deutsche Telekom is using smart contracts to negotiate tariffs for roaming costs with other telecoms. If we can store trade certificates and shipping documents on the blockchain, you can check to see where those organic avocados really came from, who grew them, who packed them, and who shipped them. Besides, the Internet of Things needs a ledger of all those things. Well, that's the idea behind private centralized blockchains, maintained and controlled by corporations.
A famous example, the Walmart supply chain trial, which they're working with IBM. That's completely centralized. They use a blockchain-derived product, Hyperledger, but all the nodes reside on the IBM cloud, and they're all administered by Walmart, and their suppliers use it because Walmart told them to. It's a centralized database system, but they marked it blockchain. So that means, one, they wouldn't have got a New York Times headline if they'd just said database.
You might wonder, what's the point of a blockchain if it's controlled by a company? Well, I compare it to the open internet versus company-owned intranets. They both exist. Meanwhile, Facebook announced a cryptocurrency for their 2 billion users. Such a system might be more efficient than a public blockchain, but there's a downside. Some governments banned it within weeks. You're based in New York, right?
Right now, the ways pieces of paper that's being shifted around, that doesn't make any sense. That infrastructure needs to be replaced.
Why occupy Wall Street when we can build a new one on the blockchain instead? In the future of decentralized finance, stock certificate, corporate bonds, insurance policies, property deeds, mortgages, all can be turned into crypto tokens and made tradable 24/7.
What's much more exciting than tokenized securities of traditional businesses, where it's just equity that you pass around, is totally novel digital securities that you couldn't do before, right? Novel use cases where you could kick back cash flow on a continual basis. I think some examples of this that we're seeing now are MakerDAO, Binance, which has Binance Coin. That's actually much bigger of an opportunity because it represents something totally new.
My name is Dr. Gemma Green, and I'm a co-founder and the chairman of PowerLedger. And we use the blockchain to enable electricity trading, energy asset financing, and carbon markets.
This award-winning Australian company wants to take us to a carbon-free economy faster. Gemma has identified a problem.
Apartment buildings, often the buildings are tenanted, and it means that if there is solar panels, the owner of the apartment isn't really incentivized to put in solar panels or batteries because the tenant benefits. But using our platform, the tenant will pay their electricity bill to the body corporate.
Using PowerLedger, the tenant pays the owner, not the power company, for the electricity. And if the tenant isn't at home, the unused energy will be sold to a neighbor, lowering their power bill and making a profit for the owner.
So it actually creates the mechanism to justify investing in the capital in the first place.
This clever system could also speed up investment in sustainable energy projects by making it real easy to own a piece of a solar or a wind farm. Why do I need a blockchain for this? Can't I invest in a solar farm without this new fancy tech?
The blockchain acts as a kind of asset register and income register, and in tokenizing the asset, it becomes tradable on an exchange. You might own 2 or 3 solar panels of 1,000 in a solar farm, and you would receive the income associated with that amount of ownership.
Now, bankers don't very much like being cut out of the cash flow loop. So they took another look at Mr. Nakamoto's curious little white paper. And they've recently been spending $1 billion a year in blockchain research. Isn't it ironic? Satoshi's anti-bank invention is now being used by the banks to move money faster and by big business to track supply chains. Cryptocurrencies, digital tokens, public blockchains, private blockchains, where is the killer app? Well, adoption of new technology often follows old trends.
My name is Mark Ventresca. I'm here at Oxford, the University of Oxford, on the faculty. I'm an economic sociologist by training, interested in how large-scale infrastructure changes.
So great to see you after 9 years, I
know.
think. Mark teaches a class on innovation and system building. He tells me what must align for a new technology to become fruitful.
All technologies start out as interesting ideas. Some of them begin to develop into innovations, and we know that that arc from invention to innovation takes a lot of time and takes a lot of work. Some of those innovations eventually become commercially viable.
But can this technology ever become as pervasive as the internet? I came to the Computer History Museum in the heart of Silicon Valley to find out.
So you're looking at the console for SAGE, which was probably the first computer network. There were 23 centers around North America to warn against Soviet bombers, and they were waiting for World War III.
The US military and some American universities asked this guy to create a new kind of network to connect their separate networks.
This young girl got up and she had a bunch of questions, but her first one was, how did I manage to convince all the governments of the world to let us build the internet? And I said, well, except for the handful of us that were actually working on the internet, nobody else really thought it was a very good idea, and so they didn't think it was going to lead anywhere, and we pretty much had a free running room.
Yes, that's the man who co-invented TCP/IP about 50 years ago. That's the original academic paper. You can think of TCP as the backbone of the internet. But back then, there were many competing technologies.
There was a very big battle over the protocols. TCP/IP didn't just win by default. It won through attrition by basically being better, simpler, easier to deploy than all of the other proposals.
Scalable.
And more scalable. And it had a lot of competition from phone companies.
And then there's email. Email, I heard that's really neat.
Email was perhaps the internet's first killer app. Then, in the early 90s, Tim Berners-Lee introduced the World Wide Web as a 20-page proposal. Soon, there were browsers that made it more accessible and user-friendly for the general public.
I think that the internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. And the one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cache.
Still, few understood the potential of this new tech.
From people that thought it would just be the world's greatest library to some of the early cypherpunks, who are the direct fathers of crypto and certainly blockchain-type ideas, who thought, much as today, that it would create kind of a commons that was outside of the direct control of normal laws and governments.
And the media? They didn't quite know what to make of this new thing either. But sure enough, they found juicy stories about the dark side of it.
Which was the internet is full of criminals and pedophiles and pornographers. And it's too dangerous to use your credit card on it. It's full of scams. We're seeing the exact same story now.
We envision technology as if it were autonomous, as if it were simply outside of human and social experience. What we see are technologies that become shaped by commercial interests, by political and regulatory infrastructure, by actors who are acting for many reasons, right?
Yeah. Where do you want me?
Remember Bob? The big telecoms wanted his thoughts on a little idea they were kicking around.
They had a meeting where they were trying to figure out how they could buy the internet. If they couldn't kill it, well, why not own it?
I got asked that myself by an executive at a large information company. It was probably in 1990 if they could buy the internet.
I remember asking them, well, why don't you buy the world economy? You can own everything. Why don't you buy the weather? And you can control that too.
It took a few decades and hype cycles, but the wild internet was eventually domesticated, co-opted by trillion-dollar companies, and then fundamentally transformed how we shop, work, and communicate. Speaker's Corner in London's Hyde Park. For 150 years, this has been a safe place to stand on a soapbox, to sell your ideas, preach the gospel, badmouth the king, or promote communism. Today, with the World Wide Web, we can stand on giant digital soapboxes. Using Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, we can share our ideas or start a fight with anyone on the planet.
Interests of the overwhelming majority.
Well, almost anyone. Of 65 countries studied, China has the least free internet, worse than Iran, Cuba, or Syria. A police force of more than 2 million cyber cops and the world's most sophisticated artificial intelligence system keep China's web content clean and users in check. So sorry to break it to you, but there's no longer a World Wide Web. Welcome to the splinternet. No, it's not just in China.
In Russia, Wikipedia is illegal. Facebook is outlawed in Bangladesh. There's no WhatsApp in Dubai. Twitter was banned in Turkey after news about government corruption spread. And Saudi Arabia shut down the region's largest news service, Al Jazeera and the BBC. Meanwhile, in India, the entire web was turned off 100 times last year.
To be fair, some of the censorship is to prevent terrorist recruitment or to stop violent mobs from hurting people. But I think government's control over the internet has gone just a little too far. Hold on. Satoshi turned money into code. Code is just letters and numbers, which is speech, right? So money now is speech, which is a pretty powerful idea if you think about it. But if Bitcoin is this uncontrollable, uncensorable technology, can the blockchain also enable global free speech?
In some places, it already does. One Chinese student tried to report a sexual assault and was silenced by her college. But she knew that she could attach a message into the metadata of an Ethereum transaction. So she spent 15 cents, and now her letter outlining her story and the threat she received is on the public Ethereum blockchain, where it will remain unchangeable forever.
The early crypto pioneers wanted to democratize money, finance 2.0, if you will. But now the believers in the blockchains have their eyes on a bigger prize. They want to decentralize everything, Web 3.0.
What most people in the crypto space are probably most excited about is this notion that we can create these kind of user-owned decentralized networks. You can, for instance, offer file storage in the way that an Amazon does, or that you could offer search, the way Google does, but do it in a peer-to-peer fashion without this behemoth at the center extracting rents, and do it in a way where all the people that are users of it can benefit.
Blockstack is the next evolution in computing. We've seen three main eras of computing before. We had mainframes that were these large computers that everyone depended on. Then we got desktops where users were in control and they owned their own computers and their data and information. And then we saw cloud computing where we are dependent on these large companies running services for us. And we are about to embark on this major shift in computing called decentralized computing, where users are getting back in control.
And they really could someday compete with, if not even take down, some of the big tech giants like the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons that we know.
That's a tall order.
It is, but I mean, who would have thought at the beginning of the internet that Wikipedia would beat out Encarta?
It's too early to tell whether projects like these can succeed, but I do like the idea of digital property rights. Wouldn't it be nice if companies paid us in cryptocurrency when they use our data? And if we control who has access to it instead of our digital overlords? Because let's be honest, do we really trust Google, Microsoft, and Facebook? With a blockchain, we don't need to rely on middlemen anymore. It's a trustless system. Meanwhile, Ethereum is building the future of decentralized finance with thousands of applications. But the network is also struggling to keep up with demand. Oh, and new competitors are on the rise. So guys like you will build a better future and we can trust you guys better than the bankers?
You don't have to trust us. That's the beauty. We're building a trustless, decentralized system that gives power to people.
Trustless sounds like there's no trust, but actually it means we don't need to trust you. I think the better word should be trust-free. About 1/3 or maybe half of all the cost of all the transactions are paid to establish trust between trading parties. Like we're paying for lawyers, we're paying auditors, we're paying even police, even regulators, government to build trust, to ensure everything will be enforced. So trust is quite expensive. Blockchain is the first time that we saw some technology that can eliminate the cost or reduce the cost of trust dramatically. Magical things will happen.
Trust may be expensive, but it's also in short supply. All around the globe, people have been losing faith in the media, institutions, and governments. This technology, with the big brains and big egos behind it, could fix one of society's biggest issues. But just how different are they from our current political, financial, and business leaders? Are their systems really resistant to corruption, immune to manipulation, and worthy of our trust? Maybe that's why the best bet is on the only project without a figurehead. Bitcoin doesn't care about human drama, bad press, or what anyone thinks. Yeah, sure, it hasn't succeeded as a global currency yet, but in the past decade, it has been the world's best performing financial asset. So we're back to where we started, the genius who vanished.
With Satoshi being gone from Bitcoin, Bitcoin is really a very decentralized network and currency.
He was intelligent enough to know that a system without a father was going to be much more robust than a system with a father.
No father, maybe, but without leaving a will, the kids are now fighting over the meaning of his invention and the inheritance, projecting their fears and their fantasies onto his legacy. For some, it's money for the internet that can replace middlemen and bank the unbanked, and maybe a tool for illicit trade. Or is it digital gold, a totally new asset class? A bet against the bankers, an insurance against inflation, protection from corrupt politicians, and a weapon against the state. Maybe the end of money as we know it. For some entrepreneurs, it represents a shortcut to fund their dreams, a platform for fairer finance, which is why incumbents fight it. Some say public blockchains are just slow and useless databases, while big business is busy building private blockchains to boost efficiency. Or maybe this decentralized technology is a new protocol layer for the internet, upon which we can build a better web. To dethrone the tech giants, reclaim free speech, protect online identities, and facilitate free trade in a borderless digital economy. And yes, maybe even save the planet. That's a never-ending list of cryptopian ideas. Isn't this a bit too much to ask of a 9-page document? Yeah, sure, the internet and the web started out as white papers too. But it took decades before its infrastructure was built, became user-friendly, and ready to scale globally.
We kind of domesticate the wild potential of technologies into what's familiar, and we dramatically underestimate or underimagine what that technology may eventually do.
It'll be the users, maybe billions of them, who will adopt this technology without even knowing what a blockchain is or how it works. Because here's the thing, the average users don't care about the wires that move their money quicker, don't know about the software that moves this movie or that picture. What will move them are services that'll make their days a little brighter, their chores a little lighter, and their lives a little richer.